Mike Sherbino. Find the Way is a program helping you find hope for this road called life. This is a program that addresses the issues of life by understanding where God is in the midst of it all. Well, good morning to all of our listeners, and hello, Mike. Glad to be back here with you.
Hey, Ashley, and I'm glad you're with us as we unpack the final talk in this 6-week series that you called Climate Change. And it's really because things just kind of blow into our lives and they blow out, and sometimes there's carnage, or hopefully a lot more times than not, there's that gentle breeze. But then we come to this whole thing called marriage. And last week we were talking about communication and conflict. You mentioned right as we were going off the air that we're going to come back and talk about the whole thing about how do we deal and work through forgiveness. And we're going to get that eventually. But, you know, today I want to talk about, you ready for this? This almost sounds corny. 3 steps to marital bliss.
Wow.
Is it true? You know, sign up today and you'll get a free vacuum as well. But that's not really what it's all about.
What we see in the movies, is it really for real?
Yeah.
You know, as we jump into the subject, I just wanted to read something that Tim Keller has put in his book. And then we'll dive into this subject even more. He says this: in other words, some people in our culture, they want too much out of a marriage partner. They do not see marriage as two flawed people coming together to create a space of stability, love, and consolation, a haven in a heartless world, as Christopher Lasch describes it. And rather, they're looking for someone who will accept them as they are, complement their abilities, and fulfill their sexual and emotional desires. This will indeed require a woman who is a novelist, astronaut with a background in fashion modeling, and the equivalent of a man. It's so true nowadays.
I'm trying not to laugh.
Yeah, a marriage based on not on self-denial, but on self-fulfillment, would require a low or no maintenance partner who meets your needs while making almost no claims on you.
You know, one lady said, you don't need a husband, honey. You need a 52-inch television screen.
Well, I think there's a lot of truth to this. We're looking for that person to fulfill it. And then we also feel the expectation of we have to be that for somebody else. And Keller's making the point of, does this even exist?
Well, he recognizes how narcissistic we are, how self-absorbed we are, and just meet my need. And we throw off these, you know, we do the dance of the peacock, you know, to attract the other person. We strut our stuff. But down deep, we're just craving that emotional care, need, the comfort that we desperately want. And we never want to give it back because we're coming to marriage with the wrong view. Marriage, more than anything else, highlights the selfishness of people.
Yeah, Paul Tripp says, the biggest problem in your marriage is you. And I think there's probably a lot of truth to that because we can be selfish people. But I'm like where you're going with this because you're going to talk to us about how do we actually have a perfect marriage? Is it possible?
There's 3 little things that I think are critical. In the first half of the show, I'm going to talk about one of them, and then we're going to come back in the second half and I can deal with those 2. But I just want to say you're listening today to Find the Way. You can find us at findtheway.faith. We hope you'll write to us. We'll be right back in 20 seconds as I begin to unpack the first key principle. Be ready for this, for marital bliss.
Thanks for joining us at Find the Way. Mike, give us that first step to marital bliss. I want to hear this for sure.
Yeah, well, I want to begin by telling a story, and it's a legend. And the custom for many years on the Hawaiian Islands was for a suitor to pay for the right of asking his beloved's hand in marriage by giving her father, you ready for this, cattle. Now, most young women of marrying age would require 2, sometimes even 3 cows. And if a daughter was a special catch, she might fetch 4 cows. It is rumored that one father in the distant past received an unfathomable 5 cows for his amazingly gorgeous and charming daughter. Now, there was an islander named Sam Carew, and he had 2 daughters, and he faced a serious dilemma. No one on the islands considered his older daughter beautiful. Aware that her shyness and plain features were not an asset for a proposal, Sam had accepted many years earlier that he would not likely fetch 3 cows for her. He dreamed of 2, but would settle for 1. In fact, if he knew that a man would treat her well, he would let her marry without receiving any cows. He felt fortunate that everyone agreed his younger daughter was definitely a 3-cow kind of girl. Then one day, Johnny Lingo, a wealthy landowner, came to pay Sam a visit. Everyone knew Johnny was ready to settle down and assumed he was coming to propose to Sam's younger daughter. But to the surprise of the whole town and to Dad's delight, Johnny came a-calling for his older daughter. It was more than he could have hoped for, Sam thought. I might get 3 cows, and as he let his imagination get the best of him and thought maybe 4, you can imagine his shock when Johnny brought his 10 cows for his daughter. Whoa. And when the happy couple came back from a year-long honeymoon, the villagers were amazed at the difference in the young wife's presence. She was strikingly beautiful, graceful, poised, confident, and self-assured. Everyone thought Johnny got a bargain, paying only 10 cows for her in marriage. It was clear that Johnny viewed Sam's daughter differently than the villagers. He saw beyond her outward appearance and recognized the beauty of her heart and character. And the value he placed on her true beauty helped her realize her true worth. The moment he paid 10 cows for her, she became a 10-cow wife. Sometimes someone has to tell us what we are worth before we can realize it ourselves. Now, we can smile at that story, and I've taken some time to share it with you because I know that that picture is going to stay in your mind. But the moral of the story, the principle, speaks so much into the relationship that God wants you and I to have in marriage, how we see each other and how we value them. And the things that we've talked about earlier in this show and also last week where it becomes so hard to continue to love the person. We get so angry and so ticked off at them. All that would change as we begin to view them differently. And so as we come to marriage today, we need to realize that the core of marriage is this agape, unconditional love of Christ. It's what God wants you to experience in his life. As you experience the selfless love of Christ in your love, that will help you then to put the other person ahead of your own agenda and interests. And so as you begin to think about, what my marriage is to look like, at the core of it, God says, my unconditional love needs to be what you're drawing on. And one of the ways that that is tested right out of the gate when it comes to marriage, on the first day you're married, right through to the very end, is that God calls the man to be an unselfish leader. We all have responsibilities, but one of the responsibilities of the guy is to be the leader in the home. Now, it's not like what Dolly Parton talked about, working 9 to 5 ain't no way to make a living. And we can think of examples at work where the boss has just been, just a miserable person. That's not what God is talking about. He talks about what it means to be a leader by using his own son, Jesus, as the example. It means 2 things. First of all, we're called to be a servant. So guys, I've never had a woman come into my office as a marriage counselor and say, my husband serves me too much. When you begin to serve your wife and treat her and see her the way that Johnny Lingo did in the story that I told you, when you see her as the 10-cow wife or the 20-cow wife, she's just going to glow in that incredible love. The unselfishness of being a servant. There's something else as well. God calls you in your leadership to not only be a servant, but to be sensitive. Ephesians 5:29 says that a husband is to nurture and cherish his wife. It's the picture of a miner going deep into the earth in search of treasure. In other words, God says, I want you to encourage your wives and to enrich her so that she will discover and be all that God created her to be. Wow. And so that's the type of relationship that God calls us to be when he says that husbands are to be unselfish leaders. Ashley, let's pick that up and discuss it, and then I'm going to come back and talk about the other 2 points.
Well, what are the ways that you've learned you can be an unselfish leader? Because it sounds great, but in practical terms, how do you do that?
Well, by nature, I'm just a selfish person. And so I find that daily that I have to say, Lord, help me to put your agenda first. I want your agenda. And his agenda for me is to put your mom's needs ahead of mine. And it doesn't mean that there's not that give and take, and there's a place where that's her role as well. But I need to say, when I come home and I walk in the door, regardless of what she's been doing, where she's been working, whatever, my focus needs to be on her. I need to put her first. And rather than always jumping on my motorcycle and taking off and doing what I want to do, maybe there's something that's very important to her. So I say, you know what? I want you to be first.
So being an unselfish leader doesn't mean it's all about your agenda then.
That's right. We work on it together, and don't worry, she cuts me a lot of slack, and you know the inside stories, but that's where it starts. I mean, it's hard. Every day I got to make that choice.
What happens if someone needs to make a choice for the family, being the unselfish leader, and you're not agreeing on it? What do you do with that?
Man, you got to pray. And you gotta walk that road with wisdom and say, God, I need to enter into that. You got to weigh it all through. And especially then, I need to talk that through with my wife and say, what is the best thing? And I need to give her permission to speak into me so that I can hear maybe what I don't really want to hear. Because just for the record, I am far from perfect. Okay? But you know what? We're going to listen to an amazing song. We're going to come back and talk more about this whole marriage thing, the next two things. But let's listen to Carrie Job as she sings the beautiful song called Forever.
One final breath he gave as heaven looked away. The Son of God was laid in darkness. A battle in the grave. The war on death was waged. The power of hell forever broken. The ground began to shake. The stone was rolled away. His perfect love could not be overcome. Now death, where is your sting? Our resurrected King has rendered you defeated. Forever he is glorified. Forever he is lifted high.
Well, I know you've been enjoying that song, but we want to take a couple moments on today's show to bring you a very important announcement. Because Find the Way, as we currently know it, is in the midst of a change. Change always happens. Sometimes it catches you by surprise. But as we've been praying about what is the right thing to do, for several months, people have been encouraging us to go completely digital. Matter of fact, ESPN laid off 100 of their top announcers because they're going digital. It's the way, not just of the future, it's the way of now. And as we've been processing what that would look like and providing teaching videos and doing more of this programming that we have, but only by people logging onto the website, we realized that we could have an international reach and literally go around the world. It's a hard move because we love doing radio as we know it. And then to our surprise, the fantastic station 650 AM, where we record everything, announced to us a couple of weeks ago that to their surprise, they had been bought out by Rogers Media. And it just seemed that God was saying, this is the time when we need to make the shift. And so this is our last program in this format. Now, I would encourage you to log onto our email, send us an email so that we can correspond with you and keep in touch with us as we take Find the Way, not just across Canada, but around the world. Thank you so much.
Welcome back to Find the Way. Online, we can be found at findtheway.faith. I'm really enjoying this topic, and we looked at step 1 of marital bliss, but there's 2 more pieces to this whole puzzle.
2 key pieces, Ashley, and as we begin to think about the unselfish leader who is not just a servant, but he's also sensitive to the needs of his wife, that means that, I'm just not going to love your mother the way that I want, but the way that she needs to be loved. And then vice versa. That's how I've experienced it as well. Because marriage is not about my comfort. It's about me giving myself unconditionally to the other person. That's why everybody is so weepy-eyed when the vows are done at the front of the church saying, oh my, isn't this so wonderful, so beautiful? And all the guys are snickering at the back, saying, oh yeah, just give it a week or 2. See, I've done so many marriages. I've seen so many times this happen and get played out. But here is the second thing. If you want your marriage to work, and if right now, as you're listening to this program, you're going through a huge time of struggle, then I want to invite you to start to do this simple thing. I want you to think about what it would mean to be understanding listeners. Seems kind of obvious, but many times in a marriage, we don't listen. We've talked at different times on the show about people being absorbed in their phones. And, you go into a restaurant and I watch 4 people sitting down at a table and they all got their iPhones out and they're all texting different people, but they don't talk to each other. I also know what it's like when I'm sitting across from somebody and I'm pouring my heart out to them, and they're looking out to the left, to the right, to the up, the down, and all of a sudden they take a phone call. I just feel second rate. One of the most successful people in the scriptures is a man by the name of Nehemiah. And if you doubt his success, then I want to encourage you to get on a plane and fly to Tel Aviv. You get off the plane there, you're going to see the walls that he rebuilt in about 60 days, the walls of Jerusalem. It was nothing short of a miracle. And he responded because he listened to the needs of people. He asked one man, "How are you doing?" And the man poured out his heart. He said, "The city of Jerusalem is lying in ruins." And God began to speak to his heart because he chose to listen. And then a miracle began to happen. If you want a miracle to happen in your relationship today, you need to listen not only to the words of your partner, but you need to listen to their heart. That is critical. And one of the ways you do that is you put the newspaper down, you put the magazine down, and you just talk to one another. Marriages go through seasons, and I'm in a season now with my wife, Terry, where, on most evenings, all our kids are gone and they're not there. And that's great when everyone comes home, but a lot of times now it's just the 2 of us. And part of our routine is that we sit at the table and we talk to each other and we don't do anything else. And then sometimes, 4 out of the 7 nights in the week, we'll take a few minutes after that and we'll actually even play a game together. And that's just kind of a lot of fun. But we talk, we communicate, we look each other in the eye. You see, when you do that, you say to the other person, "You are of great value to me." It's not enough just to say that I love you. It's important to say that I love you by the way you listen. We need to listen with our heart. And then, we need to pause and say, have you understood what I'm trying to say? We talked earlier, Ashley, about the whole issue that people don't change. And one of the reasons we oftentimes don't change is because we're not listening to the heartache of the person that we claim to love. And many times it's the spouse who has caused the heartache because they've been insensitive and they've just plowed on. So we talked about being an unselfish leader. We talked about being understanding listeners. And the old adage, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, and so we should use it appropriately. Listen twice as much as we talk. But here's the final thing. We need to be unconditional in our love. We talked about that right in the very beginning, the unconditional love of Jesus that we're to model. And the scriptures, when we read them, are all about the love of Christ. In 1 Corinthians 13, we have that amazing passage on love. And as we read that passage, we hear what love is. And it says these words, that love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it's not rude, it's not self-seeking, and it's not easily angered. My goodness, is that even possible for our relationship? But that's the unconditional love of Jesus. And the Bible teaches that when you invite Jesus to be center in your life, his Spirit will come and dwell within you. And these evidences of his presence will begin to be seen in your life. So love is patient. What does it mean? It means it seeks the other person's advancement. You don't get frustrated and shoot your mouth off if the person is a few minutes late or they're just not clicking along to your timetable. The second thing he says is that love is not self-seeking. It means that life is more satisfying living for the other than yourself. At the end of life, when it's all over, what I hear at funerals is people talking about how that person made an impact because they gave up their selfish desires to meet the need of the other person. Those are the things that are fulfilling. There's another powerful thing that Paul slips in here. He says, here's the love of Christ. Love does not keep a record of wrong. In other words, every day, you and I have a choice to rip up our scorecards of all the things that our partner did that didn't quite measure up. We can either mull it over and, turn it into a real negative stew, or we can choose to forgive and say, I'm not going to continue to dwell on that. The Bible says that love bears all things. It means it doesn't criticize in public or put the other person down. People, I just want you to pause wherever you are listening today and focus on that thing, because one of the greatest gifts you can give to your spouse is not to belittle them or to tear them down. I know that's one of the greatest gifts my wife has ever done for me. In all the years we've been married, and now it's 36 years, she has never once criticized me publicly in front of anybody. Did I ever deserve it? You bet. But she chose to talk to me privately. Remember we talked last week about setting the place for a disagreement or that heart-to-heart talk. That's the gift of love. It says love believes all things. Wow. It gives the benefit of the doubt. Love hopes all things. It means it refuses to take failure as final. And love endures all things. It doesn't give up. And that's the love of Jesus. I love the words of Mother Teresa. One day she said this, "The things that cost the most in life do not require a lot of money. They require a lot of sacrifice." The things that cost the most in life don't require a lot of money. They require a lot of sacrifice. And if you choose to sacrifice and give yourself to that other person as you let Jesus love through you, you're going to reap benefits that you could never, ever imagine. And that's what the love of Jesus is all about. And we invite you to experience that, to discover it. That's really what Find the Way is all about. Letting people know that the love of Jesus is there to give you hope and to change the situation that you're in right now. Now, we're going to be back in just a second, and Ashley's going to do some pushback on that, asking me questions like, is that really true? Is it really possible? Can it happen? Stay tuned.
Welcome back to Find the Way. Well, Mike, you have just unpacked the principles behind the 3 steps behind marital bliss. So we looked at being a leader that's unselfish. We talked about being an understanding listener and exhibiting unconditional love. And I just want to say that seems like a really hard thing to do.
Well, it's not natural, Ashley. And that's why I don't want to even miss this huge opportunity to say we need the presence of Jesus in our lives to be those kinds of people. And when we ask him, he will show up. But a lot of times, we can pretend to be very religious and we go along so far. But when it comes to the area of my marriage, I really like to be selfish.
You say that this doesn't come naturally. And we talked just earlier on in the show about a quote by Tim Keller, but that's actually one of his points in the book. He says that so many people have come to him and said, love, shouldn't it just be something that comes naturally, right?
Yeah, no, you got to work at it. And the reason it doesn't come natural is because we are so selfish. I kind of love one of the things your mom, my wife, does is that when we're walking along, she's always concerned about posture. And she says, stand straight, put your shoulders back, don't slouch. And I'm thinking, blah, blah, blah. She's going on and on. But what she doesn't know is that when she's not there, I'm walking around, and I got my shoulders back and, I'm strutting my stuff because she's constantly reminds me. See, the natural thing is for us to give in. We don't want to strengthen the core muscles. But when we do, it is incredible.
So if we have problems, if we're not this way, like if we're not this unselfish leader or understanding listener, what does that mean then? Is it
means that all
hopeless?
those things are going to cause us to slouch. Those are going to create deformity in us because we need to become the people that God's created us to be. And that's the good news today, is that God doesn't want me to be unfaithful. God doesn't want my mind filled with polluted thoughts or pornographic images. God wants me to reflect him. And when I do that, when I live through and allow Christ to love through me, I'm experiencing what he created me to become. And that becomes a beautiful thing.
So working at this isn't a symbol of, it doesn't signify that there's a problem. It's actually should always be work. We should always be trying to pursue Christ and become more and more like him.
Yeah, and Ashley, it's like discovering a new rhythm in our life. Because many times, if we're honest, we talk about addictions, we talk about obsessions. Many of those things are unhealthy rhythms. And we try to cover it up and we try to admit that so much of that's not there. But the problem in marriage is that it exposes all that stuff in various shapes and forms. Are we ever perfect? No. But we sure have opportunity to improve. And that's where we need God's help.
Yeah, it's interesting. Often we come to marriage and we think this other person is going to fulfill all my needs or make me whole. But it's actually 2 broken people that are coming together that only can find that wholeness if they're actually seeking themselves the unconditional love of Christ.
Yeah, so we've been talking a lot about marriage, and let me just segue for at least 2 minutes here, because let me speak to the issue of singleness. Because one of the dangers of singleness, and I'm not suggesting for a moment that you can't be fulfilled by only being married. I think you can be very fulfilled as a single person. But still, even as a single person, you have to say, am I just going to be pursuing my selfish pursuits? And you can get absorbed with that. And you don't realize, how deformed you can become emotionally.
Yeah, because we still have, regardless if you're single or married, we have the calling to love, to, experience the love of God ourselves and also to love one another. And I think it's very true. Often I have to stop and reflect on my own life being a single person and saying, what am I caught up with? Like, what are my priorities? Where am I actually seeking my fulfillment?
Because sometimes that flexibility can be a good thing that you have, or not so good thing. And where it becomes really good is when you can just enter into the life of someone else and maybe help them to pick up and help them to do something or to accomplish something. Whereas because I'm married, I don't have that much time to be able to go and help that person. So you can use it in a variety of ways.
Mm-hmm. I want to go back to something I asked at the end of the last show. How do we begin to forgive? Because I think that's even just a key part, in going after the passage in 1 Corinthians too. Love being all of these things.
Yeah, and it's not enough, Ashley, for someone listening today to say, okay, all right, we're just going to start fresh today. Guys like to do that. Okay, let's just start today. Let's not deal with the past, because the past can be like just a bad, ugly scar, so we have to address it. And forgiveness is the route for going that. I mean, there are some steps that we can take for forgiveness. I don't know if you've thought about them, but I know that I have some here that I'd love to share with the people.
Yeah,
So here's something that you can begin with. It's a beginning point. First of all, you need to admit or own that what you did was wrong or hurtful. Because if you never do that, it's like the person is looking at you saying, so what's with all of that? And I see so many people who don't want to own their garbage or the pain and wrong that they've done to people. And here's another thing. We talk about victim impact statements. And we get that when somebody has gone out and shot someone, and the family give that victim impact statement. So in relationships, you need to try to understand and empathize with the pain that you've caused people. So that's a huge thing. I think the other thing is you need to take responsibility for your actions and make restitution if necessary. And then to assure your partner you're not going to do it again. That's that whole thing about building trust.
Yeah, but how do we do that if we're broken people? Can we make those kind of promises?
I think we can come to the person and say, what would be important for you in helping to restore the relationship? I think asking, that's a starting point. Because when I ask someone that, if I've hurt them, they're hearing that I really am genuinely sorry. Now, maybe they'll choose not to forgive me, but I hope that they will. But at least I've started to make those steps. And by asking that, I'm demonstrating that I really am committed to the process of change.
Mm-hmm. Then from there, where are you going to move forward?
Well, I think the other thing is you got to apologize and ask for forgiveness. And then I also need to come to the point where I say, I got to forgive myself. Even if the person is going to forgive me, I need to now choose to walk in a new path.
If we don't actually forgive ourselves, if we don't receive that forgiveness from Christ, it changes the way we live and the way we interact with the person that we're married with or in relationship with. And we live condemned then. And so I think that is a huge part of it. It's walking in the freedom that we've been granted.
And really, that's what Find the Way is all about. It's helping people to discover the freedom that God wants them to have and that you can have today, even as you approach marriage. I hope you've been encouraged by the program today. Ashley, thank you for being here, for entering in where no one else has dared to go. You can find us at findtheway.faith. Hope you have a great day.